Very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standards Board of Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, I welcome you all in today's webinar on key considerations in the audit of aviation sector. As we have covered almost all the sectors, today we are going to cover a very important sector, that is the aviation sector. And in order to tackle this very important sector, we are having with us very learned, very eminent, very respected speaker from our Chartered Accountant fraternity, C. Rajiv Saxena ji. So on behalf of AASB of I extend my warm welcome to you, sir, on this AASP platform. Welcome to you, sir. Namaste, Rajiv, sir. We are having with us Manoj ji. He is going to moderate today's webinar. So, on behalf of AASP of I extend warm welcome towards the today's moderator, CA Manoj ji also. I also welcome all the participants of today's webinar. So, I request Manoj ji to please start the proceedings of today's webinar. Over to you, Manoj ji, please.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining this call. So, as part of quick, first of all, I would like the opportunity of my quick introduction. Would come to topic and then quick introduction. My name is Manoj Kumar. By qualification, possess close to 8 years of post qualification experience to different domain, internal audit, risk management, control optimization, as well as the assurance side as well. I am currently associated with the PIRA Consulting LLP as a manager in risk advisory domain. And today we are here to discuss the key consideration in the audit aviation sector where Mr. Rajiv, Rajiv Saxena sir would enlighten us about the topic, what key consideration we can look at in this specific industry. If I would quickly introduce Rajiv sir about his introduction, Rajiv sir is a chartered accountant by qualification, and he is a partner with S&N Dhawan and Company LLP, which is a very renowned organization in India. Over his 25 years of career experience, he handled and advised on numerous engagements on matters relating to statutory audit as per Indian GAAP, India's tax audit, as per Indian regulation, project management implementation, as well as audit of IFRS, US GAAP. Rajiv sir has very good experience in international assignment, including development project conducted for European Commission audit of World Bank audit project, and has exposure in due diligence and business valuation engagements. He has been part of this FRRV subgroup, New Delhi, basically subdivision 2 from 18 to 19. And Rajiv was also member of AASB study group. Presently, he is a special mighty of Auditing and Assurance Board of ICAI as well. Over to you, Rajiv sir. Please take the charge and please enlighten us on this renowned, like this eminent topic what you are right now want to pick up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anilji, for first of all for giving me this opportunity, and thank you, Manojji, for your kind words which you have used in the introduction. So, I think, as you rightly mentioned, that this is one of the most complex topic in the present world. That when the aviation sector is on the rise and on the growth, I think there is a thrust by Indian government also to increase our footprint in the aviation industry, and we are seeing that new airports are being added year after year. So I think our footprint also in the industry in the sector has multiplied. I will just share the presentation which I have. And let me know when you are able to see it.
Yes, sir. Fine.
Okay. So yes. Before we move forward, I would like to kind of give a overview of the industry, because it is very important for any sector or any audit that we understand that sector or the organization of that sector, key constituents of that sector, key regulators regulating that sector, key challenges which that sector entails or maybe carries with it, and then only we can decide on how effectively, how efficiently we can devise our audit procedure. So I will just take you through maybe the sector. So if I give you a little bit of background of this sector, India growing fast. We know that India is one of the largest economy, fifth largest, and then expected to be third largest maybe in very short period of time by 2028, 2027, 28. And at the moment, we are already third largest market in the civil aviation business across the globe. But this sector, and for the right reason, is heavily regulated. Because of it had it is very is the sector which uh, transport passengers, human lives, and that's why the requirement of regulation or regulatory environment is very robust. Uh, if you look at the scenario of FDI in this sector, 100% FDI is permitted in aviation sector, scheduled air transport services, domestic scheduled passenger airline, whereas 49% is available under automatic route, and if you want to bring in 100%, then you have to take the government approval, which is also not difficult these days. We can see some of the players have already started approaching Indian market in this sector. Moving forward, if you look at what are the various segments of this sector, because aviation sector is very vast, and when we look at aviation sector, we optically we see the aeroplanes taking passengers from one destination to other, but there's a lot the whole paraphernalia working around this, to make that sector working. So if you look at the key constituent or key segment of this sector, commercial airlines definitely is one of the key segment of this sector, which is optically visible to us, both passenger and cargo. And if you look at some of the major player in this segment are Indigo, which holds 60% of the market share in the Indian civil aviation industry, Air India, FedEx, DHL Aviation. The second is very strategic and very important is airport developers and operator. Historically, Airport Authority of India was taking that responsibility. But as we are moving towards public-private partnership, we see a lot of private players are taking over that responsibility along with the government. And where government continues to play the role of a regulator. So the other players in the sector, which are prominent one, are GMR and Adani. And we all know that the foreign players have also started coming into this market. And this Jewar Airport, which has been recently tested for its first commercial airline or aircraft or flight, that has been awarded to Zurich Airport, which is an international player in this market. The third strategic segment is aircraft manufacturers, which is the key, and we see that Airbus, Boeing, Dassault, HAL, which is the Indian player, have started playing key role. Where Airbus and Boeing are the largest player, and you would keep hearing in the news and in the business world that Air India and Indigo are placing large orders to Airbus. As a matter of fact, Airbus reached out to the Indian government and Indian players for thanking them for keeping them busy and giving them order book, which is probably going to keep them busy for next 10 years. The other service providers, which are MRO service, which is very important because when you are running an airline, and in order to make that airline is available to passengers or taking or covering the sectors uninterruptedly, then the MRO service play a key role, and you would see a lot of number new players coming in the market to manage these MRO services, air navigation, ground handling, etc. So whenever you are going to the airport, you see that your luggage is being transported from your check-in counters to the aircraft, and there is a lot of systems working behind that, a lot of players working around that, a lot of processes and controls working behind that. Moving on, as I mentioned, this is a very heavily regulated sector, and for the right reasons, because it is a matter of human life and safety. So the first and foremost regulator is Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA. Their responsibility is to grant license for pilots, aircraft maintenance, engines, and airlines, enforcing airworthiness standards and safety regulations. And this is a continuous job. They keep doing continuous monitoring, and so it is the responsibility of the players to reach out to them to seek their approval and kind of license and certificate to carry on the business they are in. Investigating aviation accidents and incidents. So they take every nearly miss or accident very seriously, and they make sure that the reason behind that are mitigated. the people responsible are kind of punished, or maybe they are made to understand that this is a very serious business. Monitoring compliance with ICO, which is International Civil Aviation Organization standards. So this is also the responsibility of DGCA in India to make sure that we are complying, or all the players in this sector are complying with those standards. The second is the Airport Authority of India. So this manages and operates most of the airports in India. Air traffic management is also the responsibility of Airport Authority of India. Infrastructure development of airports, this is the broader responsibility. Ensuring safe and navigation and communication system, and this is also the responsibility of Airport Authority of India. The third regulator is Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, which is called BCAS. They are responsible for aviation security regulations, framing security standards and monitoring their implementation, ensuring airport and aircraft security compliance, and certification and training for aviation security personnel. This is the responsibility of Bureau of Civil Aviation. Then we have Ministry of Civil Aviation, which is broadly on the policy level and the regulation level for the aviation sector and its growth, oversees the implementation of national aviation initiatives like UDAN. So they want to make the flying maybe an experience of available to common people in India, and that's why they have launched this scheme of UDAN, which is which is taking care of the regional connectivity of various sectors. Then Competition Commission of India, I think they play a big role. Now we see that after failure of some of the larger players in the market like Jet Airways, Kingfisher Airlines, and some others, we have very few players available in the market now. So it becomes all the important for Competition Commission to make sure that there is no cartelization, there is no predatory pricing, there is no unfair practices, instituted by any of the player in impacting the prices, which is not which is unfair to passengers at large. Last but not the least is Airport Economic Regulatory Authority, which is called ERA. This is regulating tariffs. So what will be the fare for various sector? What will be kind of the the frequency of increase of tariff? What will be the reason for which the tariff should be increased? So these are all regulated and monitored by ERA, monitoring performance of various airlines, encouraging competition, encouraging investment, and protecting the user interest. What are the regulatory changes in this sector? I think I have picked up only the key ones. So one is diverse regulatory requirement. So it's very heavily regulated. Environment compliances, because you operate planes with so much of. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. Sorry for this disturbance. We have some celebration going on in office, and that's why there's a little bit of. So I'll just move to the previous slide. So key regulatory changes, challenges in the sector. So diverse regulatory requirement, environment compliances because of the way the industry operate, safety standards very important, and data privacy and cybersecurity because we carry the data of so many passengers, both global and Indian. So international passengers come with their own privacy protocols, including GDPR, which is the European standard for the privacy of data. We are coming out with our own privacy norms, for the data, personal information. So I think these are the four key regulatory challenges which require a lot of investment and monitoring by these sector to make sure they are on the right side of these challenges. Key focus areas for the sector are safety, for foremost, compliance to these regulatory challenges, and then operational efficiency, because we have seen that this sector is heavily regulated. The cost of operating the airline is not it's very expensive, or it's very high cost affair. So bringing in efficiency to make it profitable, to make it sustainable, to bring in break even as early as we can with both non-aviation and aviation revenue streams. It's very important. And last but not the least is financials, because there's a lot of disclosure requirement. There's a lot of financial disciplines which are to be maintained when we are presenting the financials of these sector players. If we talk about industry specific risk, so we have three categories of risk which I have identified for this sector. One is operational risk, the second is regulatory risk, and the third one is financial risk. If we talk about operational risk, flight safety and maintenance is one of the key risks, which is more on the business side. Supply chain disruption, because this industry is heavily regulated on various third-party service provider. IT environment, how robust is your IT system is, what are the controls which have been implemented, how the cyber security has been kind of ensured. So these are the three operational risks, because any mishap on the cyber side or the IT side can disrupt. We must have recently noticed that the IT system of Indigo, did not perform for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, and they had to cancel a lot of flights. They were issuing a lot of things manually, but they could not manage that kind of pressure manually, so they had to disrupt their operation, or their operations were disrupted because of that for certain hours. Moving on to regulatory risk. So compliance with aviation authorities like DGCA, AAI, ERA, which we just talked about in the previous slides. Export controls and environment regulation. This is more on the aircraft manufacturers who are exporting aircrafts, and if they are making aircraft with military facilities, then there is a lot of regulatory regime which they have to follow before they can reach out to the international market. Financial risk, revenue recognition complexities, be it airline, be it airport developer, be it MRO services, or for other I would say ancillary services which are making this sector running efficiently. All have their own revenue recognition complexities. Asset impairment remains the key financial risk area, and lease accounting. I don't know how many of you are aware. I'm sure most of you are aware that lease accounting, the present lease accounting, which is India's 119 or IFRS 19 is you can say it has come because of this aviation sector. The person and I, who started thinking on changing or revamping the lease accounting, which were earlier accounted as financial lease and operating lease, and there were a lot of rules which were kind of I would say borrowed from US caps to identify which one is a financial lease and which one is operating lease. And sometimes these rules were so bookish that maybe by just a fraction of element, even if you very strongly feel that this is a financial risk, but because it is not meeting one rule, you were compelled to classify that as operating lease, and it was not reflecting the true picture of the financial statement. So the gentleman who conceptualized this revision of IFRS or lease accounting, he was traveling in an aircraft and incidentally looking at the financial statement of that airline, which was a very large airline in US market, and he was very surprised to see the balance sheet was not looking that heavy, because he was sitting in a very large plane and there was nothing on the balance sheet. And then he thought that we need to do something so that a true reflection of assets is there in the financial statement, and that's how this lease accounting for airline, or for that matter for any business was revisited. And now we have the new set of lease accounting, which has done away with the process of operating and financial lease, and we have to look at the right of asset of use, and that's how the accounting is being done. Key financial areas in the audit of aviation sector, if I talk about some of the key areas, I think revenue recognition definitely remains one of the top area, and that's why that is on number one. Lease accounting is followed, which is also equally complex and equally time taking. Property, plant equipment, and capital expenditure, because these airport development is a long term contract concession agreement running over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, maybe sometime longer if certain approvals are not coming in its place. So a lot has to be done during the audit to make sure that these expenditure are first recorded carefully and then accordingly capitalized based on the requirement of the accounting standard. Concession agreements and other government contract, because this sector is heavily regulated, and that's why the participation of government is very I would say very huge, and not only in India but across the globe. And that's how complying with those concession agreements, meeting the covenants of those agreements, meeting all the compliance requirement of contracts, especially with the government obligation, are a key factor in the audit of these sector. Regulatory compliances, other than the coming from government contract, which are various regulators which we have to follow the regulatory regime. Borrowings, because this is a sector which is hugely capital intensive. So I think none of the player can think of starting something big with their own resources. It has to be a mix of equity and borrowing, and that's why the borrowing play a key role. And accordingly, the accounting of borrowing, compliance of the covenants, its impact of on the disclosures, and kind of accounting of those borrowings and their classification, and maybe capitalization of borrowing if they were into the capex period becomes a key consideration for audit. And last but not the least is operations and maintenance cost. So we will cover all these topics little more in detail as we move forward. So if we talk about key financial audit areas for airlines, actually, so the four key factors which I have been able to identify, of course, you have to look beyond these factors also, but these are the four areas which are going to take 60-70% of your time in audit, and the first being revenue recognition. So how is the access control environment around revenue recognition, deferred revenue analysis, ticketing system reconciliations, refunds and adjustments, cargo revenue. So if I talk about all these, kind of revenues for revenue documentation, so how do you understand the revenue recognition policy? So you will have to obtain and review the airline's revenue recognition policies, ensuring compliance with the accounting standard for sure. The IFRS 15, ASC 606, if you are looking into an international this thing, you'll have to raise your inquiries around, what are the key revenue streams within the business. Passenger fares being one of the key stream, but cargo, ancillary services, and their recognition criteria all may not follow the same recognition criteria. So what are the key revenue streams, and what are the revenue recognition criteria of these revenue streams? That becomes important from an understanding point of view. Then you have to evaluate the control, because what is the key in this sector? The kind of volume this sector handles. Maybe if I try and give you some numbers, last year itself, which ended year ended 31st March 2024, the aviation sector handled, or air passenger traffic which was handled, that was close to 375 million. And this year, we have the numbers for the first quarter only. Second quarter is still to be published and evaluated. For the first quarter, which was April to June 2024, the sector has already handled close to 100 million passengers. So by this growth, maybe we might be handling more than 400 million passengers throughout the year, which will be ending on 31st March 2025. So with this kind of volume, and if you take the example of Indigo for that matter, which holds 60% of the market share in the Indian aviation sector, maybe in the airline business at least, the number of passengers which are being handled by them, the kind of revenue which will be contributed by these passenger fare is going to be tremendously huge. And with no stretch of imagination, you can get the comfort on these numbers, or on these revenue coming out of these many number of passengers, by doing some transaction testing. So the heavy investment has to be made on in terms of time, and in terms of effort, in terms of the level of monitoring by the leaders, maybe partner and the engagement leader, engagement manager, is on analytical review. So you'll have to first evaluate the controls around it, test the design and implementation of control over the revenue recognition process for all the revenue streams. It is very important, not only for just passengers fares, all the revenue streams which are there in that business. Segregation of duties, who is recording the revenue, who is doing the reconciliation, what are the adjustments which are being made on month-to-month basis, what is the periodicity, what is the nature of those adjustments, how strong the IT systems are. You have to, what is the ticket sales system, how is the billing generated, what is revenue tracking to ensure accurate data processing. So analyze passenger revenue. So when I come to the point that analytical review becomes very key or very important in these kind of businesses, so you have to obtain schedule of deferred revenue, because many a time the airline sells the tickets in advance. So you have unearned ticket sales, and what are the systems built around that these revenues are recorded, in the correct period of time. Verify the revenue is recognized upon flight departure. So this is one of the criteria for revenue recognition. If you look at the revenue recognition policy of various large players. Ticketing system reconciliation. How do you reconcile revenue recorded in the journal ledger with ticketing system outputs? Some of the system which they use as GDS or CRS data. So you'll have to make that reconciliation to make sure that the numbers are in the giving you the right picture and they are moving in the right direction. Perform cutoff testing to ensure revenue is recognized in the correct period. As I mentioned, you might have unearned ticket sales and things like that. Refund and adjustments. You know that this industry, or for that matter any passenger industry, do encounter cancellation of trips, travels. So reconciliation of refund and cancellation policies. First of all, you have to review what is the refund and cancellation policy, whether that has been fully complied with. Are there any exceptions? What are the approval matrix or kind of DOA, delegation of authority for approving any departure from those policies of refund and cancellation. Test a sample of refunds and cancellation for accurate treatment in the financial. Now so this was more on the passenger revenue, but how do you look at the ancillary revenue, which is coming from, let's say, sale of baggage fees or seat collection fees or in-flight purchases and partner commissions. So how do you first identify those revenue streams and then see what is the recognition criteria and then test the recognition on the sample basis for these ancillary revenues. Loyalty programs. I think Indigo has also started, but they were the airline which never had any loyalty program or you can say. But I think they're also thinking on launching some, and they've already launched it. So how the loyalty program works, what is the point allocation and redemption criteria, what are the policies for loyalty program points, frequent flyer miles, how do they come into play, test samples of points issued, deferred, redeemed, or for that matter, how have they expired, so how they have been kind of taken care in the purpose of accounting and liability evaluation. Liability on these royalty points, evaluate the methodology for estimating the liability associated with the unredeemed loyalty points before they expire. Test some assumptions like redemption patterns, breakage rates, and all that. The next revenue stream is cargo revenue scheme. So how do you take care of that? Again, revenue recognition timing, verify that revenue is recognized when cargo is delivered. Contract review, examine contract with cargo customers for special terms. You have a standard way of recognizing revenue, but if there are specific contract which are very different terms, which may be impacting revenue recognition, you have to be conscious of that fact, and you have to make sure that if there is any specific terms which are different from the standard contract, they have been kind of taken care of while recognizing revenue. And then this sector give you a lot of discounts, incentives, and commissions. So customer incentive, test a sample of discounts and promotion to confirm proper accounting. You would have seen, a pre-Diwali sale and Christmas sale and the New Year sale and things like that, where they started selling tickets as a discounted rate. So what is the policy? How that policy has been adhered to? You'll have to test some samples also. And then it comes to agents commission, because you would see a lot of agents in this sector who are operating, who are facilitating, the ticketing or booking of tickets, validate that commission paid to travel agents are treated as cost and not netted off revenue, because that's a cost, so it should not be netted off revenue. And then analytical processes on trend analysis of revenue of this period versus prior period, budget versus actual performance, analyze key performance metrics such as load factors, revenue per available seat per kilometer, which is called RASK, and yield, per sector for consistency with the reported revenue. And now, when you have done all these things, then it comes to compliance with the regulatory and tax requirements. So regulatory compliances ensure compliance with the aviation authority regulations and reporting requirements, confirm correct treatment of taxes on ticket sales, primarily, the indirect taxes. And then you will have to perform, for substantive testing on some transaction level testing. Cutoff testing is also very important in this business. Disclosure and presentation of financial items. So confirm appropriate classification and disclosure of revenue in the financial statement. Ensure disclosure aligned with applicable standard covering deferred revenue, performance obligations, and key revenue policies. And then, so this is broadly about the revenue. When it comes to lease accounting, ensure completeness of lease. Examine key terms of lease agreement, judgments and estimates around incremental borrowing rates, lease term, and impairment testing. Aircraft maintenance provisions. So this is also very important because this is a key cost, or one of the biggest costs. And now with this more and more MRO coming into Indian, jurisdiction, Indian geographies, there are a lot of MROs being set up in Hyderabad and in Bangalore, maybe in Nagpur. And, so what is the key objective of these MROs is to make sure that the flight schedules are have least disruption, because if any planes plane go out of action because of the preventive maintenance or maybe kind of operating maintenance, then probably that sector gets impacted because of lesser number of flights and stuff like that. So in order to have least disruption of the flights, I think the MROs will come into play when you take your plane for the maintenance of the engine. They take the engine down, put a new engine as a as a measure to let you take that plane back and put that into service. In the meantime, they take good care of the engine which has been unloaded or which has been taken out of the plane, and it does not disrupt the plane operation. So the aircraft maintenance provisions, this is very key because nothing comes for free. So if you have taken that arrangement of taking an alternative engine into your plane so that your flight schedules are not disrupted, of course there will be a cost, and that will be cost of maintenance. How do you account for it? What are the key criteria? Identification of types and schedules of maintenance. Not necessarily you are responsible for making sure that unfit aircrafts are not flying. That may not be your responsibility. There are many regulators for that. But if you have any indicators, which shows that some regular scheduled maintenance have not been taken care of, they have been delayed and stuff like that, what could it have impact on the overall maintenance cost? Because if you keep doing maintenance on a schedule, then your maintenance cost is reasonably controlled because you know what you are doing. But if you delay a certain process, then that the cost which might be required to be incurred may be significantly higher than your normal maintenance cost. So from that perspective, you have to make sure that routine checks and major overhauls are done as per the schedules, analysis of historical maintenance costs, review of contracts with maintenance providers. So what are the risks in this maintenance actually? Evaluate the risk of material misstatement in a maintenance provision, in the account. Identify any high risk areas such as new aircraft types, fleet expansion, or regulatory changes. Which I remember, Indigo has bought certain new planes, and they have got two sets of engines, one Airbus engine and one some other. And they had problem with one set of engine, and probably the cost of maintenance was pretty high. So I'm sure the auditors must have taken, and a lot of this cost was back to back. This was covered under warranty, this was covered in the initial maintenance cost, which might have been borne by the engine manufacturer, but some of these costs might have come to hit the P&L of the operator also. So I'm sure the necessary procedures, risk would have been assessed and regular provisions which have been evaluated. So examining of maintenance schedule, review historical data of maintenance costs for reasonable patterns. If you see that the cost in the previous year was X and this year the cost is X minus Y and significantly lower, then you might this might give you an skepticism that the enough provision or the adequate provision has not been made. How they have passed on that cost, had that cost been absorbed by some other player for any other contractual obligation and things like that. So it raises skepticism, and then you should follow through that skepticism to arrive at a logical conclusion. How do you justify that variance, and how do you justify the steepness of that variance from period to period? Inspect contracts and agreements. So review contracts with maintenance providers for terms related to costs, services, and timelines. Ensure all contractual obligations are reflected in the provision. How do you look at the financial review? So evaluate cost estimation, assess the basis for cost estimate used in the provision. For example, labor, parts, downtime. Validate assumption used such as inflation rates and exchange rates for international vendors, because as I mentioned that so far these MRO services were largely dependent on overseas vendors, and the engines were supposed to be flown to those overseas locations for maintenance and stuff like that, which was increasing the cost and which was impacting, bringing the risk of foreign exchange fluctuation also. These MRO services are more and more are being, kind of made available indigenously or in locally, but that will take some time, So these are being set up. Some of them have reached reasonable completion. Some will take a little more time. So this risk may still be there in terms of exchange fluctuation. Accounting treatment, we talked about IFRS or the applicable gap, ensure the provisions are recognized in the correct reporting period. Disclosures, financial statement disclosures relating to maintenance provisions for completeness and transparency. Regulatory and compliance review. So inspect compliance documentation, verify that maintenance activities comply with the relevant aviation regulation. Ensure any deviation are documented, justified, and approved by the appropriate authorities. Because if you are not following the maintenance schedule, the regulatory authority would not let you fly, and so these are very important. Impairment testing is the key assessment of impairments of aircraft and related assets. Involvement of internal valuation experts. I think aircraft is one asset which has components having different lives. Some components are facing very high wear and tear, and that those are supposed to be replaced earlier than the other equipment and other components in that asset. So how the impairment testing is performed, how you have identified the various risks related to that, valuation, sensitivity analysis, key and assumption. This becomes very important. When we come to regulatory, the inspection of audit certification and licensing confirm that maintenance personnel and facilities are properly certified and licensed. Check records of regulatory audits and findings. So if maintenance facilities are subjected to regulatory audit, and if that audit has thrown certain findings which were required immediate or action in due course of time, how those have been implemented, this also becomes. So all these things may have financial implications if they have not been complied with. So it becomes an audit risk and becomes part of the audit procedure. Moving on to the next sector, though this sector is very big and I can spend a little more time on this, maybe in terms of disclosures, in terms of testing for completeness and accuracy, judgments and estimates. Maybe let me cover some of the aspect on the leasing criteria. Like so how the lease portfolio works. Obtain the lease register, obtain a detailed list of lease agreements including aircraft, real estate, and equipment leases. Verify that all these lease contracts are included by comparing the lease register to expense accounts, fixed asset schedule, and minutes of meeting. Understand business operations, airlines operating model to identify any unrecorded lease or embedded lease. So this is generally maybe in a partnership agreement with the airline and stuff like that, where the revenue is shared. So you have to be very careful. Evaluation of lease classification, lease agreement, lease classification, and reassess classification, right of use assets, which we all know, and then a lease payment, their schedules, any escalation in the lease and stuff like that, depreciation and interest expenses. Disclosures are very important, and then embedded lease. You have to evaluate if there are any embedded lease element in any of the lease contract. Control testing, and then judgment and estimate. So incremental borrowing rate, for instance, that is used in these accounting, especially how do you review that methodology used to do that incremental borrowing rate for accuracy and appropriateness, these term adjustments or judgments, impairment testing, and these are the key factors when we talk about lease accounting and aircraft impairment testing. Moving on to the next segment of the aviation sector, which is the airport operators and developers. So airport operators and developers, again, revenue recognition is the key criteria there also, because there is a revenue sharing with the concessionaire or Airport Authority of India, and that's how it becomes very important. The underlying data basis which the revenue is shared is very important. So what is the control environment, passenger and landing fees? So how the revenue is in airport, for an airport developer or airport operator, the revenue is of two types. One is aeronautical revenue, and the other one is non-aeronautical revenue. What is aeronautical revenue? Of course, related to passenger and landing fees. And the non-aeronautical revenue is concession income, lease and rentals, deferred revenue, and things like that. So if we talk about passenger and landing fees, what we have to do in audit, we have to verify the accuracy of revenue generated from airline operations, including passenger service charges, landing and parking fees, reconcile with operational data such as passenger traffic reports and aircraft movements. Non-aeronautical revenue, this is concession income, test income from retail, food and beverages, outlets, and other concessionaires, because the main concession agreement give the right to the concessionaire to sub lease or give rights to the various players in that airport or in that area, including the Aerocity, and you have a revenue stream coming out of all those. So what are those arrangements? How those accounted for? Beverages, outlet, completeness of recognition, contracts, conditions, how they have been met, revenue sharing agreements, with these operators, how those data are, what are the data points, what is the accuracy of that data, completeness of that data, that becomes the key. Lease and rentals, confirm rental income from airport facilities such as office spaces and cargo areas, by comparing lease agreement with the recorded revenue. So various operators take various spaces for various activities within the airport area, and there's a revenue stream coming from that, so which has to be evaluated for completeness, for compliance, for accuracy, and for compliance with the agreements. Deferred revenue, so the recognition of advance payment for pre-purchase parking or lounge access to ensure revenue is recognized in the appropriate periods. So this is very important. When we come to airport operator, the other key aspect becomes a concession agreement. So what are the key aspects of concession agreement, key terms of concession agreements, revenue sharing provisions, periodic escalations and renewals? So first of all, contract completeness, ensure all lease and concession agreements are recorded and reconciled with the lease register. Compliance testing, India's 116 accounting, evaluate the recognition of right of use assets and lease liabilities for leases in line with the applicable accounting and standards. Embedded leases, identify embedded lease components in service agreement, for example, advertising concession or fuel supply contracts. So these could be embedded portion within the lease contract. Regulatory compliance is also key, which is the third element of this sector from an audit perspective, from where we are going to be spending a lot of time, 70-80% of our time. Aviation and safety standards is one of the three regulatory area which you have to focus, test compliance with local and international aviation safety and operational regulation, including reporting requirements, because these requirements are very strict. If you don't follow, you may not be allowed to operate actually. So all the assumptions on your future projections of revenue, which is which is used for impairment testing and various other purposes, will go for a toss if you do not comply with these regulations and your operations are disrupted, for any period of time actually. So that's why it becomes very important that we take a specific cognizance of these risks in our audit. Environmental compliances verify adherence to environmental laws and sustainability obligations such as noise abatement measures and carbon reduction commitments and all that. I'm sure many of you will be aware that the Heathrow Airport in London does not allow any flight landing after 10 p.m. because they don't want to disrupt their citizens staying close. So various geographies have various regulations, and any player which is operating in that sector, that area, have to comply with those requirements. Government grants, review the accounting and disclosure of government subsidies or grants for import development operations. So these are some of the regulatory compliances which are important, because government grants are there to develop the sector, to make it more accessible to common people and all that. So, and if those conditions are not met and those benefits are not passed on, in the way the subsidies stipulated, then it becomes the obligation of the auditor to report on that and then probably question and see is there any specific approval for any non-compliance or departure from any of these conditions of subsidies. Property, plant, capital projects, infrastructure development, project approval is the key. Testing capital project approvals and governance. Cost capitalization, confirm that cost related to infrastructure projects are appropriately capitalized and distinguish between repair and maintenance versus new construction. Contractor payment, this is part of the capital expenditure. Test payments made to contractors and vendors for validity, approval and compliance with contract terms. It's very important in these kind of contracts because these are very, I would say, large contract covering a very large area of land and stuff like that. So I think I have seen that there's always a third party validator for the work performed, so that firm or that agency certifies the work has been performed based on the running bills and accordingly. And once it is completed, also they confirm, the meeting of the specification and the standard with which the contract was awarded, and that becomes a key document when you look at the completion of the capital expenditure and its availability for capitalization. So work in progress also becomes the key when you are looking at the capitalization aspect. Then operations and maintenance costs, which we talked about. Asset management is another area where you have to see how the controls are built and depreciation and impairment testing are done. Borrowing is also very key, because as I mentioned that airport contracts, they are running into thousands of crores. In order to develop a reasonably sized airport, you might require the total outlay or project cost would be running into 15, 16, 17, 18 thousands of crore. And in order to fund that kind of project, the element of borrowing is also very huge. If you follow the 1:2 criteria of also equity versus debt, the amount of debt is going to be very huge. And the loan agreements, the various covenants, the various conditions with which the loan has been extended, the various, imposition imposed on the borrower for not making any payment to let's say any of the shareholder before the entire repayment of the loan is done, and if it is done, what is the approval mechanism and stuff like that for necessary payouts and stuff like that. So these are very important, and the breach of covenants may have additional interest cost. It may have the recall situation also of the loan, and because these loans are very large, very huge, so recall situation is something which is going to be very risky and can challenge the sustainability or the going concern of these businesses. So very important aspect of the airport operators and developer business. And as I said, because the numbers involved or the data involved is so huge, so you only getting into transactions may not help. You have to have a very robust understanding of the controls around it. it has been seen, and which is inevitable, that a lot of automation is required in these kind of environment and these kind of businesses. What is the robustness of those automations? What is the intervention, manual intervention, which has been built in into those automation controls? How we have tested it? How much we have involved our IT teams and expert teams, technical teams to evaluate those control environment, the design, and then probably consistency with the changing environment, the changing landscape. And then, how robust is your analytical procedures to reflect any of the anomalies in any of these, especially with the revenue recognition, or for that matter, related to other aspects of operating costs and maintenance in this kind of business. Moving on to the next segment of this sector, which is aircraft manufacturer. So revenue recognition will always remain the key focus area. But the other key focus area is cost accounting and overheads, because these are long-term contracts. How the cost of allocations are made. We will talk about that maybe in a little more detail. In a little while. So warranty and after sales obligations, borrowings, and inventory management, these are the five. So let's take up revenue recognition first. So as I mentioned that Airbus has their order book, keeping them busy for next 10 years, maybe more. And so how the contract terms are validated, what are the performance obligation, what are the allocation of transportation prices. We have to ensure that revenue is recognized in the applicable accounting standard, goes without saying, So, and then cost accounting and overheads, how the cost is allocated, because they might be manufacturing multiple, depending on the size of the facility, they might manufacture more than one or more, multiple in various segments of, for one aircraft, they might be working on something, some component relating to its tail. For other, it might be the main body. For third plane, it might be the nose and the wings and things like that. So how the costs are allocated, how the overheads are allocated. So evaluation of cost allocation matrix for direct costs, overheads, and labor to ensure accurate product costing. Assess treatment of research and development costs, how they are allocated on the overall production costs, especially those eligible for capitalization. Warranty and after sales obligation, these are very important, because every Airbus engine, for example, they comes with some mandatory hours of training, which is free, which is coming. Why? Because if Indigo is buying a plane with an Airbus engine, it is the obligation of Airbus to train the pilot or train the maintenance staff or train the engineering staff, to understand, the nuances of the engine which has been used, how does it behave, what are the key factors they keep in mind. And most of these operators have set up their training centers in India, because you can't send people from India to be trained overseas, which used to happen earlier. But now the training centers are in India. So this is part of the cost, of the engine which is sold to these players. The warranty and after sales obligation, verify provision for warranties, maintenance, and repairs, ensuring sufficient accrual based on historical trends and contractual obligations. Evaluate contingent liabilities relating to product recalls and defect claims. So, which was the case in the case of Indigo when they bought some planes with Pratt and Whitney engines. So they had to file their claims and stuff like that. So I'm sure the auditors of that manufacturer would have taken the cognizance of these claims, how these are, how far they are within the contractual obligation. So very complex subject matter, and requires a lot of judgment and senior level attention to make sure that we are not missing, because the numbers involved are very huge, and the implications of not accounting for or incorrectly accounting for are serious. Borrowing again remains a serious business. So various procedures are more or less the same in terms of covenants and in terms of the cost accounting and stuff like that, accounting of interest and various other. If it is a ECB or foreign currency buying, how the hedging has been affected, how does that impact the overall cost, things like that. So hedging becomes a very important strategic player in these kind of borrowings actually. So which becomes an integral part the cost of borrowing, because you may borrow from an international market of 4-5%, but if you include the cost of hedging, which is generally in the range of 3 to 4%, it comes close to 8-9%, and then you compare it with the Indian borrowing rates and stuff like that. Having said that, so making sure that all the elements of borrowing costs have been adequately accounted for. And then last but not the least is inventory management, valuation and classification of raw material, work in process, the valuation of work in process, finished goods, particularly given long production cycles of these aircrafts, assess potential obsolescence or impairment of inventory due to technological advancement. So sometimes you are making planes for 10 years, but when you start getting into the production cycle, production schedule, you feel that the inventory which was bought 3 years back may not be completely relevant because the technology or the other components have changed, and now this component will not fit in. And these kind of analysis is done by the management, but you have to definitely ask for that and then see the appropriateness of these assessment and the necessary impairments accordingly, which is required for technological advancement or technological obsolescence of these components. Then we move on to key for financial audit areas for maintenance areas and overall MRO services. I think this is very important. I just touched base on the localization of MRO services in India because of being the third largest aviation industry in the world. So I think it got the attention of various service players, and in order to optimize and make the MRO or the maintenance more efficient, they are setting up MRO services in India. So revenue recognition again becomes a very key audit risk area. So what we need to do, verify revenue recognition under contracts for maintenance, repair and overhaul services, time and material basis, fixed price contracts or subscription models. These are the three models which run into MRO services. Then asset treatment of unearned revenue from advance payment and ensure proper matching with service delivery. This is where the key. Then inventory and spare parts, very important. Audit the valuation and management of spare parts and consumables, including classification between inventory and fixed assets. And evaluate inventory obsolescence provision due to rapidly changing technology or regulatory updates. So likewise, it was true for the aircraft manufacturer. It is quite true for the MRO services also, because if you have a stock certain component based on previous version of engine and that has become kind of out of operation because of obsolescence and all that, you have to also take the hit of that. So it is very important that obsolescence of rapidly changing technology are taken care of. Work in process, ensure proper recording and valuation of ongoing repair or maintenance work in WIP, because these are a little long term, processes. It is not that the engine comes today and it is being sent. Sometime certain parts of the engine are still sent to overseas locations for various tests and processes and repair work, and accordingly they come back and they are fitted back and stuff like that, and a lot of process in the interim are carried out within the MRO in India. So it's a long period affair, and accordingly how do you record for these costs and make necessary valuation of WIP has become very important. Cost accounting and labor, because of and that's how review the allocation of direct labor and overhead cost to ensure accurate cost tracking. Any expenses which are of the kind of non-operating nature, nothing to do with engine manufacture, if that is going into the cost of labor, or then probably you have to kind of look at that. Evaluate efficiency metrics and treatment of overtime or contract labor expenses. Very important. Evaluate contractual regulation warranty provisions. This is very important. Assess provision for warranties and post-service obligation, because whenever the engine comes for service, that this goes back with certain level of warranty and kind of I would say assurance of certain mileage, and ensuring that these are based on reliable historical trends. So we are not making overcommitments and things like that. And if there is overcommitment, how we have accounted for the incidental costs which might come. Verify compliance with service level agreements and evaluate any penalties or liquidated damages which might hit our P&L because of those obligations. Again, fixed asset and tooling is also a key area of this MRO services because jigs and fixtures, machineries for performing test, repairs, activities, these are huge machineries and require huge capital expenditure. So their capitalization, their utilization, their wear and tear, maintaining capex and things like that, and different equipment might have different life. So how they are being depreciated, how the useful life is assessed, how the impairment testing is done, that becomes very important. Procurement and vendor management because these MROs work with a lot of vendor support. Any business has multiple vendors. How some domestic, some foreign. So audit procurement process for spare parts, consumers, and outsourced services to ensure compliance with contracts, assess the accuracy and completeness of cable and vendor reconciliation. Regulatory compliance is also applicable to this sector also. So we have to make sure that, let's say, ensure compliance with industry specific regulations such as Federal Aviation Administration or ESA, which is European Union Aviation Safety Agency, because all these players are flying not only in domestic but international arenas also. So they have to follow the regulatory norms of those jurisdiction with those regulators and review the financial impact of any non-compliance or compliance cost or penalties or fines which may hit the P&L of these businesses. So these were specific to this sector, but now I'll touch upon some audit consideration which may be applicable across these segments, whether it is airline or airport operator or for that matter MRO services or other services. So these are cybersecurity risk, which is the key risk not only in aviation but any other business, but more for aviation because of the passenger data. Sustainability reporting because these aircraft produce high level of carbon emission and stuff like that. So what are the measures which are being taken? And then third party risk. We'll touch base upon these risks also. So if we talk about cybersecurity risk, the aviation sector is particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks due to high volume of sensitive information, flight data, passenger details, and the operational complexity of aviation system. So protection of critical system and customer data security is the key focus area. Sustainability reporting will increase pressure or increasing pressure on industries to improve their environmental footprint. There's a lot of pressure on the airline industry to comply with certain norms and disclose it and show their sensitivity and kind of level of compliance tone at the top and their efforts which they are making in ESG becoming carbon neutral or maybe they can't become carbon neutral for sure, like in how much effort they are making so that the emissions are kept under control and they are not unreasonably high. And last but not the least is third party risk, because this industry is heavily dependent on third party vendors, suppliers, contracts, joint ventures for everything from aircraft parts and from maintenance services to ground handling and catering. You might have heard maybe in the international arena that one of the airport, the workers operating in that parking bay and then handling the baggage and all that, they went on a strike probably in one of the European countries, and the whole operation was disrupted for some time. So just for an example, so this is heavily dependent on various third-party suppliers, vendors, and the complexity of aviation supply chain increases exposure to risk associated with third-party operations. So what are the risks, how they are being tackled, what are the financial risks, any damages, any liquidated damages, or any cost of any alternative arrangement, how they have been taken care of. So this become important. So that is all. I think this is a very vast topic. I tried to cover some of the key points. I'm happy to answer some of the questions which you may have, and then we can uh, take some of the questions from Manoj if he has.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Rajiv sir, for this excellent session. Your insight into this key audit consideration in the aviation sector, specifically around the safety, compliance, operational efficiency, and the financial statement side, really incredible valuable for us. So, if I may, I have some few follow-up question, uh, and would appreciate if you can clarify those as well. May I ask those question?
Please, Manoj, please. Yeah, please
Yeah.
go ahead.
So actually, I got one question. What is the procedure to verify the stock of ATF, air turbine fuel, at 24 hours on the closing day of the financial year, including fuel present in the aircraft, both in the flight on the ground as well? Additionally, how can we ensure the quantity of such fuel is accurately determined for the presentation in the financial statement as a current asset?
Right. So I think I would be very honest with you. This is a very technical, kind of verification of fuel. Anything which has a volumetric element to it, you can't measure it with merely, looking at it or doing applying any normal procedures. So you have to have expert teams and with expert tools to do that. So any volumetric so most of these players who have these kind of inventories, they use third party experts actually, and it is our responsibility to be present when those third parties who are expert in doing a volumetric measurement of these stocks, whether it is in a plane or maybe in the tanks, which are used. So uh, so we have to be present, we have to understand the methodology, we have to understand the consistency. Many a time some good players, maybe from a good governance perspective, engage with multiple experts. So one quarter they use one expert, for instance, SGS. In another quarter, they use another expert, and then they try and see what are the consistency of the results. And probably for the same period, sometimes they use two technical experts to do that evaluation, and these say that if the results thrown by both these technical measurement are inconsistent or varying from significantly varying from other, and we as auditors, because it's a subject of technical matter, we have to make sure we understand this process and the methodology and the tools used and the various factors which are used to arrive at the physical quantity. They have been consistently used, and accordingly apply our audit procedures to check the appropriateness of these measurements.
Okay. And the second question, what I have, thank you so much for this clarification. I really resonate with the experience what you are talking to me. In fact, I have seen those things in the at the client place as well. Thank you so much. The next question, what I have, very general, like the what substantive procedure, just a general question at a high level, should be performed during the audit of the aviation sector to ensure the accurate financial reporting and the compliance with the relevant regulations.
So I think I've covered this point, Manoj, in my presentation, but I'll reiterate on that. In case of, let's say, an aviation sector, in airlines, given the voluminous data or voluminous data of the passengers, I just give you some number. Last year we handled 376 million passengers in India, in last financial year. This year we have already handled, 100 million, close to 100 million in first quarter itself. And if we talk about auditor of the Indigo, which has 60% of the market share, the numbers are going to be huge. So you can't get the comfort by just going into transaction details. So when you say substantive, it has to be a combination of analytical procedures and some test of details actually. And where analytical procedure has to be very robust, where you can actually get maybe the trend and then probably comfort on the variations, the budget versus the various data which are responsible for arriving at those numbers, which come from different sources, from the airport authority, from, let's say, airline own capturing of data and stuff like that. So you have to corroborate all those information to see whether there is any material misstatement of information or any of the financial items which are presented in the financial statement of players in these sectors.
Okay, okay. And the last side, as you mentioned at the start, beginning of the session, basically this is highly regulatory, like the industry, this aviation. And I also like echo the same thing. But actually the question what I have here around the how do the airlines stay updated with the changing regulation from the authority like DGCA or AAI? Basically, there could be a chances where like these regulatory authority keep changing the regulation, considering the safety or other things on very frequently. So how these, like being an auditor, we can ensure whether the like the industry aviation companies like keep going through this the latest update what is being updated by the authority.
So, Manoj, as you rightly mentioned, this is a heavily regulated sector, and that's why the responsibility of making sure make 100% compliance, because this is one sector where tolerance of non-compliance is almost zero, I would say. And that's why there are specialized teams with specific knowledge which have been instituted to make sure that, and for any regulation for that matter, I gave you some examples of regulators, DGCA, or for that matter of international regulators. So there are people who are specializing in each and a specific this thing within the compliance team, and who have the sole responsibility of tracking and making sure. And if they have even iota of any doubt, they keep going back to the authority to seek clarification from time to time, so that they are completely abreast or updated with the latest requirement. And for that matter, these regulatory agencies are also very proactive. Actually, they keep performing periodic inspection, test, interviews. They keep calling you to make sure that how you are organized and stuff like that. So while you are at the side of compliance, but at the same time, the regulator who is ensuring these compliances, they are also very proactive. They keep reaching out to the key players and making sure that they have the latest understanding of the regulation and stuff like that. So it's a both way process, because as I mentioned, the cost of non-compliance or tolerance is almost zero, because it could be fatal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rajesh sir. Just two more questions which basically I received from the audience here. I am just asking these two questions out of curiosity on behalf of audience specifically, if you may enlighten on this. Like, do the aircraft manufacturing company provide a warranty to the aircraft buyers? If yes, what are the those typical warranty period from the date of purchase?
Right. So I would not, comment on the period of, but I mentioned some of the costs are included in the initial this thing. Like for instance, I don't know for sure that when the engines of aircraft are sold. So Airbus, for instance, Airbus, so you can buy Airbus with the Airbus, Airbus engine also, or you can ask the aircraft manufacturer to use another engine from Rolls-Royce, or let's say for narrow body aircraft and all that, because if you feel that probably that is more efficient, or that is more reliable and stuff like that, and in terms of long-term cost, which you might entail in terms of maintenance. So various components come with various warranties, especially engine being the heart of the aircraft, comes with various obligation in terms of mandatory training, the replacement warranty, and things like that. And the period may vary from maybe I don't have exact number in my mind, maybe 3 years to a longer period actually.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful session, Rajiv sir, and for your invaluable insight what you have given to us here and sharing your expertise with us today. As we concluded, I would like to hand over the session to Anil sir to express a vote of thanks on behalf of all of us. Over to you, Anil sir. Anil, are you available there?
I think I completed the session pretty fast, so he might not be expecting that he would have to.
Yeah, let me call him if just a minute.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, Anil sir, now we can hear you. So actually, I just want to hand over the session to you for the vote of thanks on behalf of all
Yes,
of
sir.
us.
Yes, sir.
Over to
Yes, sir.
you.
I was there. Due to the technical glitch, I got disconnected. So thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful deliberation. You have covered all the aspects relating to this sector, relating to the aviation sector, and hope our members have gained a lot through your deliberation and the insight you have shared as well as the knowledge you have shared with our members. So on behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my heartiest thanks towards you, sir, for the wonderful deliberation.
Thank you, Anilji. Thank you,
Sir,
Manojji, for
thank you
this.
so much for giving
Thank you,
your
sir.
kind to deliberate today on this topic, and our members have gained a lot through your deliberation. I also
Yes.
thank towards Manojji for wonderfully deliberating today's deliberation. Thank you so much, Manojji. Thank you so much, Rajiv sir, from on behalf of AASP of IC. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Thank you, Rajiv sir. Thank you, Anil sir.